Hey everyone, so today I'm going to go through my pantry and freezer and see if we have ingredients for a new recipe without having to go to the store. There's some garlic here in the pantry. What is this? Nutritional yeast, which is almost empty, and that is a good substitute for cheese and chicken in vegan recipes. A lot of pasta. Trail mix. Diced tomatoes, chickpeas, more chickpeas on the left, tuna. I do like a tuna pasta, but there's one I make that usually has peas in it, and I don't have any peas right now. So there's some condiments, some lemon juice, soy sauce with some salad dressing. I guess I could use this broccoli instead of peas in that pasta tuna recipe. I've also got some frozen corn that I used in a previous, actually one or two recipes. I think just one I used the frozen corn with. I've got some fake ground beef, which was very tasty in the pinto bean soup recipe. I've got some vegan mozzarella, some cilantro, and these are a couple of containers of pasta sauce, or to pizza sauce, maybe. I'm not sure what my husband uses, but those are for pizzas. He has them individually portioned for pizza. And let's see, there's frozen fruit, which I used as a snack. This is a bunch of green bell peppers because a friend of mine gave me some bell peppers and I didn't have anything to cook with them before they went bad, so I diced them and froze them. So I could do something with that. And there's ice cream. The rest of the freezer is basically meat and bread and a container of the pinto bean soup that I made. So I'm getting an idea, and I think I'm going to make turkey Bowtie Skillet, but I'm going to make it vegan. This recipe usually has Bowtie pasta, but honestly, you can just do whatever kind of pasta you want. And instead of the ground turkey, I'm thinking of that ground vegan beef. Instead of is that an onion? I can use onion powder. I don't have an onion right now. And I believe the other substitute is for, instead of Parmesan cheese, I can just use mozzarella. It's not that similar, but I think it'll be fine as long as there's some cheese in it. And the rest of the things I have. So my goal with this video is to let you know that pantry cleanouts, a lot of the videos I see online of pantry cleanouts are basically like people who have ridiculously enormous stock of food and they buy things with no intention of what to make with it, and it's just there. And I buy in much smaller quantities because well, for one thing, I don't think it makes a lot of sense to waste the grocery money when you're not going to eat it for another 6 months, and because we don't have a whole lot of space to use up. So my goal here is to show you that if you look at what you've got, you can pretty much make just about anything, especially if you're willing to substitute or omit ingredients from a recipe. There were probably multiple things I could have made. I didn't even look at the section of our pantry that has the flour and the rice and the baking stuff, because I probably could have made fried rice without carrots, because I have all the other ingredients for it. We had eggs, we had corn, we had broccoli. So that's another recipe I could have done. But I was thinking about this one because I was inspired by the vegan ground beef from the pinto bean recipe, which I will link as well if you like vegan recipes. That is a good one. So for the turkey Bowtie Skillet, I'm just going to call it its original recipe name. You're going to want to take 1.5 teaspoons of vegetable oil and put that in a skillet. I'm using a nonstick one just because the fake ground beef stuck to the last one I tried cooking with it. So you take your bell pepper, you dice it up, you put that in the skillet with the vegetable oil, you cut an onion in half, you dice half of it up, throw that in the skillet, Let that cook a little bit, and then throw in a pound of ground beef. Or it looks like this bag says 3/4 cup is 1 serving. The bag also doesn't have a whole pound in it, so I didn't want to use the whole bag. So I'm going to put 1 serving of the ground beef in the skillet and brown that up or cook that. It's technically already cooked. I think you can microwave this and it's also cooked. So I'm just going to add this to the vegetables and let that simmer. So now I'm going to add the spices, and I'm doing this right now just because the last time I used this ground beef substitute, I spiced it after, like it had been cooking too long and it wasn't as spicy as it should have been. So if you're using ground turkey, you can do this at the end after you add the tomatoes. So you're going to do a 1/2 teaspoon of chili powder, which I don't have, so I did cayenne to taste, a 1/2 teaspoon of garlic powder, and then salt and pepper to taste. Stir it up to fully incorporate the spices. If you're cooking ground turkey instead, you can actually stop before you even get to the spice portion and take that whole section off the skillet. So I'm adding some Creole seasoning just because I tend to always add it to most of my recipes because stuff isn't spicy enough. But it actually is literally the exact same 4 ingredients I added before that, only mixed up in a container together. And then I added a little bit of onion powder to taste because I didn't have an onion with this recipe. So since I don't have a full cup of the ground beef or ground beef, I'm going to throw in, I think I did a cup of corn. This happens to be frozen corn. Just to bulk it up, I would normally put in a can of drained lentils or maybe a pound of mushrooms, but I didn't have that. So I thought corn was a decent filler ingredient for this recipe. The flavors were complementary. So if you're adding in a filler ingredient, just cover it, let it steam, and kind of like cook. Since it was frozen, I wanted to make sure it got to the same temperature and consistency as the rest of the ingredients. Sorry, I keep saying ground beef. I think it's funny that there's an apostrophe in that word. It's a weird marketing thing where you're not allowed for vegan meat substitutes to be spelled the same way as regular meats, in case you confuse people. And then I tasted the ground beef, and it was much spicier than the last time I used it, so that is why I put a thumbs up on camera. So now I'm switching skillets. I'm getting a slightly bigger one, and I'm going to boil the pasta now. This is my homemade chicken bouillon powder, 2 teaspoons to 1 cup of water. I had very little left after the 2 teaspoons, so I just threw the whole thing in. Normally, when I originally made this, I used to buy cubes of, I think, Weiler's brand bouillon, and that you dissolve in 1 cup of water. So my recipe says 1 cube of bouillon plus the water needed to make it. So it's basically a cup of water. So a cup of like vegetable broth, a cup of chicken broth, a cup of whatever broth that you want to use. And then you'll go ahead and let that boil. And then once it's simmering pretty well, you can add the pasta. This is a whole grain pasta, which is better for my insulin. And that is another reason why this is not a bow tie pasta. I cannot find that form of pasta in this style. So I'm just using whatever we had. And then I'm spreading it out so that it's mostly underwater. There was not really enough water to cover the pasta. So because of that, you're going to see I've had to add extra water and a little bit of extra bouillon powder. So that's just because it evaporated too much and there wasn't quite enough water for this size of skillet. So I'm just adding stuff so that the pasta cooks. It doesn't matter that much if you add plain water because you've got the general flavor of the chicken bouillon in there. It's not that strong of a flavor, even if you had the correct quantity. So don't worry if you mess that up a little bit and you put too much water and not enough chicken flavor or vegetable flavor if you're going for that way. You might catch me biting into mostly dried pasta every now and then in this portion of the video because I had to taste it every now and then to find out if it was soft enough. And then once it was, you can go ahead and stop tasting, I mean. So there I'm adding a little bit of extra water and a smidge of bouillon powder so that I can get the pasta to the right consistency. I am one person who does not like al dente pasta. I think it's weird. Pasta shouldn't be crunchy in my opinion. I like it soft. And I don't know, like if I should be able to eat pasta with just gums, right? Don't you think? And if you're liking this recipe so far, go ahead and like, share, and subscribe. It really helps the channel out. So the recipe says that when the pasta is done, there should be most of the water gone, and it sounds like usually a little bit of water is left. I had no water left, so whatever works for you is fine as long as the pasta's not swimming in water and you didn't add quite too much. So now we're going to add a can of diced tomatoes. Do not drain the tomatoes. You do want that tomato juice, water, whatever, in there. I think that helps with cooking the pasta as well. So if it's not quite as soft as it should be, the extra water from the tomato juice will help. Once the skillet is simmering, the pasta will cook a little bit more. I don't know about you, but I really love canned tomatoes. I find them very versatile. You can use them to make salsa. You can use them in a lot of pasta recipes. And I guess if you really wanted to, you could probably throw them in the Vitamix and turn it into legit pasta sauce. This is the point in the recipe where if you are making it with real turkey, you can go ahead and add the salt, pepper, chili powder, and I believe it was garlic powder at this point to the skillet. So now we're going to go ahead and add the first mixture. You know, one thing the original recipe also says is to take the turkey and vegetables out of the skillet and use that same skillet to cook the pasta. And I assume that is because of the fat of the ground turkey adding some flavors to the pasta. But every time I make ground turkey, there's like no fat left. So I've done it that way, and I don't really notice a difference from this way when I didn't actually cook it that way. So go ahead and add the first half of the recipe into the pasta, stir that up, and then you're going to want to let that simmer for about 10 minutes. I decided to add some cumin just to enhance the flavor of the ground beef because I must have tasted it at some point and cut out the scene. I did add some to the pinto bean recipe after the fact. And I think if you wanted a little bit more beef flavor, you could add something that bumps up the, is it called umami or is that just with mushrooms? So cumin is good for that. I believe also kitchen bouquet would have been a good option. Kitchen bouquet is vegan. It's just a brown liquid that tastes like gravy, really. So now I'm adding half a cup of the vegan mozzarella. The original recipe calls for 2 tablespoons of grated parmesan cheese sprinkled over the top. You technically don't mix it together in this recipe, but unless you're eating the entire skillet in one day, which you would either have to have um, a medical problem or a very large family, then it is going to end up getting mixed up when you throw it in a container and stick it in the fridge for storage. So don't worry about that if you're the kind of person who wants to just mix it all up, or if you do by accident, because sometimes I just mix crap up together no matter what the recipe says. So then you're going to let that melt for 2 or 3 minutes. And this brand of vegan cheese does melt well. I think it tastes good too. I would like to try their cheddar, but it wasn't at Walmart last time I went there. Mozzarella has a mild flavor, so I think if I can taste cheddar in their cheddar version, that would be a good way to determine if it's a good vegan cheese. So now we're going to try taste testing it, and this is wildly different in appearance from my regular turkey bow tie skillet because of the shape of the pasta, the lack of turkey, the lack of Parmesan cheese, and the addition of the corn. But I'm here to tell you that substitutions can end up being very good that way. And a pantry clean out doesn't have to look exactly like your recipe. This was delicious, and my husband agreed, and he doesn't like vegan food very much. So I hope you enjoyed it, and you guys have a great day. Happy eating!